to another edition of the Business of Story, the show FeedSpot named as the #1 business storytelling podcast for 2022. I'm Park Howell, a 7-year overnight success as host of the Business of Story, and I'm so glad you're with us today because you'll learn how to drive your affiliate marketing and sales programs using storytelling, guided by the 5 stages of buyer awareness to ignite your growth. Today, you'll learn from a self-proclaimed obsessive marketer how to leverage those 5 levels of buyer awareness. You first must truly understand where your prospect is in the buyer's journey to build affinity with your customers. Your goal is to generate repeat business, and the most powerful form of advertising there is, free word-of-mouth marketing to scale your offering.
There are a tremendous amount of people who have done exceptionally well without ever creating a single product just because they develop a community that has a high level of affinity based on the stories that they're telling. And then essentially what they will do is they will personally screen and vet the products and offers that they promote, and the people who feel an affinity with them will be drawn toward those, because they're basically able to borrow the credibility of the affiliate.
Doug Utberg is a business growth authority and host of the Terminal Value podcast. He shares how to engage at the current level of awareness your buyer has about you and your offering to connect on a primal level with their buying brain. We'll explore the trends in agile organizations and communications, and you'll learn about the Collier principle on how to enter the conversation already going on in your customer's mind. So please welcome to the Business of Story, Doug Utberg. Doug, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
I have my good friend, Dr. Kevin Gazzara, to thank for introducing us. Kevin and I got to teach together over at Arizona State University an executive master's program for 5 years. And as you know, he's a terrific leadership coach, and I was in there teaching my Business of Story program. And so he sent me a note the other day and said, yeah, you two ought to get acquainted. So really nice to have you here.
Great to be here. Yeah, Kevin's an amazing person.
Well, and you two got acquainted at Intel, is that right?
We actually met after we left Intel. So Kevin runs what he calls an ex-Intel mastermind, which is where a bunch of us who used to work at Intel will basically meet up, compare notes, in terms of trying to be successful in our post-Intel life. And Kevin actually introduced me to Shirzad's Positive Intelligence program, which I just finished going through.
Yeah, the PQ program. I did that during one of the craziest times in all of our lives, and that was the summer of COVID, 2020. And I think I was in Kevin's very first cohort, and it was an amazing program. It's about mindfulness in how you can turn a very negative thought and concept into a positive one, always finding, I guess, the silver lining, if you will, without being Pollyannish about it.
Precisely. I think that's the real virtue of the program. And I think the way that I really see positive intelligence, to me, it stems from Stoicism. The idea behind Stoicism is that circumstances are neither good nor bad, they're neutral. Much like the parable of the horse. And for anybody who, I'm going to go and tell a story of that now. I'm going to get some of this wrong, but the parable of the horse is that there was a landowner in ancient China who had a prize stallion, and one day the stallion escaped, and people said, "Oh, that's so terrible! You lost your prize stallion." He says, "Well, we'll see." And then, 3 days later, the stallion comes back and it brings 3 mares with it. And they say, "Oh, look at your great fortune. You've just, you've just increased your herd." And he says, "Well, we'll see." And then his son is trying to break the stallion, and then he ends up breaking his leg and he can't work for the season. People say, "Oh, this is so terrible. Your son, he's not going to be able to help you. How are you going to manage your farm?" He says, "We'll see." And then a general from the army comes, they're doing a conscription, and his son is left at his son is not drafted because he is unable to serve in the army. People say, "Oh, you're so fortunate because your son didn't have to go fight in the war." And he says, "Well, we'll see." And that's the thing is that, in the moment, there can be things that seem really good or things can seem really bad. But nobody knows what is going to come. And so the challenge to us is to find that gift of opportunity in absolutely everything that we experience.
Didn't Shakespeare say nothing is good or bad unless you think it's so?
Yes, but thinking makes it so.
I'm pretty sure I
precisely.
butchered that, but that's the sentiment.
That's what podcasting is all about. We're shooting from the hip here.
What's the name of your dog? I hear him barking in the background.
Oh, yeah. So I have two dogs. They're Labradoodles. Their names are Todd and Copper, which for people who are of my generation are the name of the two characters, the dog and the fox in The Fox and the Hound.
Wow, you are story-based, aren't you? So we are going to talk about something I know absolutely nothing about, but we're going to get to it in a minute. And this is your claim on your website of how I made 7 figures without needing to create my own product, websites, or personally sell anything myself. I'm intrigued because I've got products, I've got websites, and I'm constantly selling everything myself. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but give us a little bit of background on your backstory.
I grew up outside of Portland, Oregon in a town called Gresham. And, as I said, I spent pretty much the entirety of my, young and most of my adult life obsessed with doing things the right way. And so, of course, I studied real hard in school. I wanted to make sure to get good grades. I didn't have the money to go straight to a university. So I did 2 years at junior college. I did, transfer to Portland State. I joined the Marine Corps Reserve. I ended up, after that, going to work, ended up at Intel Corporation. So, had the corporate job, was working on climbing the corporate ladder. And then I ended up moving over to Lattice Semiconductor about 17 years later. So 20 years-ish into my career. And then we get to COVID and boom, I get let go. And, because of some of the corporate stuff that happens, a lot of times when you have a new executive will come in, they'll sweep away some of the people who are already there. And anyway, I hit the street in April of 2020 and I need to figure out what I'm going to do. I'm, unemployed. At the time, my wife was a full-time parent. So we have an $800,000 mortgage and $25,000 in private school tuition for our 2 kids. Our daughter right now is 16 and our son is 13. And we have to figure out what we're going to do. Oh, and by the way, the kids are in full-time virtual school. So while figuring out what we need to do, we need to try to get the kids through their school and figure out how we're going to navigate all this other stuff. So it was a big, giant stress and chaos tornado. And where I came out of it from is I'm doing a combination of some different consulting gigs, of some different contract things, and of course what you were alluding to, which spoiler alert, has to do with affiliate marketing.
I guessed that. Believe it or not, I guessed that, but we'll get to that in a minute.
You know the copy.
Where do you think this obsessive drive came from?
That's funny. That's one of the things that I think about pretty frequently because since I've gone through Shirzad's PQ course, I would have to say that there's a hyperachiever saboteur in play there. And so for people who aren't familiar with positive intelligence, the idea is that all of us judge ourselves in circumstances. And so that, that persona Shirzad refers to as the judge or the saboteur. And that judge has accomplice saboteurs, one of which is the hyperachiever, which is where people push themselves to achieve and achieve and achieve and achieve, usually out of some kind of desire for external validation. I mean, and a part of what I had to introspect about was that is something that I was trying to do. But for whatever reason, I was able to keep a bit of a curb on that so that I still stayed involved with my family. And now, a certain amount of that, I'm sure, inhibited my career growth. But as I've become more cognizant of that, what I've really been thinking about is that, of course, I want to achieve because, as you would say, because it's there, right? I'm of the belief that if you have productive capacity, you have a moral duty to bring those ideas out to the world, assuming that they are valuable in the first place. And so if you operate from that frame, then that means a drive toward achievement. It's not necessarily, to me, it's taking it out of I'm doing this so that people will accept me to I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do and I have valuable ideas that can be brought to the world.
You said something there that I think a lot of listeners will go, yeah, that sounds all well and good, Doug, but I don't really have any value to bring to the world. And I really disagree with that. In fact, I was doing a story training session the other day with Goodwill, and one of their leaders, retail leaders, was saying, well, I don't really want to share my stories because I don't think anybody really actually cares about that. And that is the biggest problem most people have, is discounting their own stories or telling them their stories themselves. So when you say, I love this concept of, if you are have productive capacity, then you should be bringing value to the world if you have value to bring. But everybody has value.
You have a moral obligation to bring it out to the world. You have a moral duty to posterity to bring it out to the world in the best way that you possibly can.
Absolutely. And even when you start that process, you're going to fall on your face time and time again because the universe has a way of pushing back. But if you believe in it and you know you are really delivering value, then keep moving forward, or pivot a little bit here and there, but don't ever give up, because I believe everybody has value that they can bring.
Yeah, and I want to unpack that a little more too, which is because I think a lot of people will say, okay, if I'm not the best at something, how can I bring value? I'm like, well, you only need to be one step ahead of somebody else in a particular domain to bring value to them. And so, if you think about, okay, there may be a lot of aspects of my life where, I feel like I'm not doing so great. There's probably a few things that, anybody listening has developed quite a bit of knowledge and experience. And so what it's really about is finding people who are looking to develop in those areas where you are ahead of them on the journey, because then you can bring value to them. And so look through that frame. There is almost no human on the planet, I would say, of normal mental capacity who's kind of reached the age of maturity that cannot provide value in some way.
Absolutely. And we have to just get over the stories we tell ourselves. That's the interesting thing about that PQ training, is those saboteurs and those different characters pop up in our lives. But again, it's just really an indicator of a story we're telling ourselves, and to embrace that, accept the fact that we're telling us, ourselves maybe a negative story and something, and then turn that. Find the other side of that coin. What is the positive outcome? You and I were talking earlier. You live up in Portland, and I grew up in Seattle, and I said, oh, yeah, fellow Northwesterner, but I've been down here in Arizona for 35 plus years now because I couldn't handle the rain. And then you turned that on me and said, but we don't have any water problems here. That's a great way. That's a very much of a PQ jiu-jitsu move right there.
PQ jiu-jitsu, yes. And also when I look out my window, I get to see green. Not that I don't like brown, but there's a lot of brown in Arizona.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about something, a concept that you had introduced to me, this Eugene Schwartz something or other. And it's the 5 levels of customer awareness. So
5 levels of customer awareness.
From your experience in sales, enablement, and so forth, let's go through that a little bit. And where does storytelling play, get involved in this?
Yes. Okay. So Eugene Schwartz, he is one of the early godfather thought leaders of marketing. He's in the, in that David Ogilvy type of sphere. So, but anyway, one of the big insights that Eugene Schwartz delivered was that there are different levels of awareness that your prospects have, and the way you communicate them should be different based on those different levels. And so just doing a quick run through, I'm going to go from kind of top to bottom. So first you have what he calls most aware. These are your fanboys and fangirls. These are the people who, when a new iPhone gets announced, will go stand in front of the Apple store for 2.5 days to make sure they're the first one who pays full price for it. These people, you can do direct advertising and you barely have to try. All you have to do is just tell them you have something available, and they will almost certainly go and buy it. The next is people who are product aware. So in other words, they know they have a problem, they know there's a solution, and they know that your product is one of the potential ways to address that solution. Well, this, or to address the problem. And so in this case, what you have to do is you have to be able to tell that story. So, or you have to move them from, okay, I know this is one of the things that I'm evaluating to this is the one that I want. The way that stories move people who are product aware is from price shopping you against everybody else to saying, okay, no, this is what I want. Your next level down is going to be, from product aware is going to be solution aware. And this is where they know they have a problem and they know there's a solution, but they don't know that you are one of the people who offers a solution. And so, as you can see, the amount of work that you have to do goes up as the amount of awareness goes down. So in this case, what you have to do is, and I'm gonna bring in another great one. Robert Collier, one of the absolute legendary copywriters of the early 20th century. One of the ideas he coined is what's called the Collier principle, which is you want to enter the conversation that is already taking place in the customer's mind. And so this is why one of the things that's really important about knowing the awareness level of your prospects is so that when you are engaging them, whether it's with one-on-one conversations, whether it's with advertisements, whether it's promotions, whatever, you want to be engaging them at the level of their current awareness. So for example, if you talk to somebody who is solution aware, they know that there's a way to solve the problem, but they may not necessarily know what all of those are. So that's where you want to start. That is where the conversation begins. And so let's move down the scale one more notch, which is where you have somebody who's problem aware. They know there's a problem. They don't even know if it could be solved yet. And again, this is where your message starts with the problem, and you start by cementing why the problem is an issue, and then you have to start working up to how it can be solved, what the different options are, how your option plays in, and why they want to choose you. And then you get to the that furthest level, which is unaware, which is people, they don't even know they have a problem yet. And, a lot of people would say, okay, well, why do you even care about people who are unaware? Here's why, is because that's the biggest pool of potential clients. The master copywriters who can, who can convert, cold traffic, who can basically take somebody who has no clue about, the problem that's being solved, the products, anything. If you can start converting those people to understand what the problem is, how it can be solved, how you solve it, why the way you solve it is going to provide more value than they can get anywhere else, that's the type of situation when you can massively expand your market. But every single one of those different levels of awareness requires a different story, which is an unreal amount of work to put together. But it's worth it because this is how you get really meaningful messages out. Because what most businesses, big or small, but especially small businesses will do is you'll craft one message and you'll pop it out to everybody. And usually that message will be somewhere in the in the realm of most aware to product aware. But then the problem is that if people are, say, only problem aware, your message won't resonate at all because it will assume more knowledge than the customer already has or the prospect already has.
So you just outlined something that apparently was intuitive to me, and I did not know about either one of these gentlemen, Eugene Schwartz or Robert Collier. And yet when I created my story cycle system, as you know, it was inspired by the hero's journey, which is a one and done circle, right? You've got a prospect, in this case, a customer who starts in their ordinary world. You are the mentor or guide that create that inciting incident that launches them into this new world where you are there to help them. They go through the trials and tribulations. They end up buying in, and then you help them, and they return home with what Campbell would call the boom. So it's a one and done closed circle. My story cycle system is actually an expanding spiral, and you just articulated it beautifully. It begins at the bottom with the unaware. So what are the first stories that you tell them to, for brand awareness, to get them intrigued, to let them know, hey, I didn't even realize I had this problem. Now, once they go, okay, tell me more. You are now into the problem aware. So you're expanding that engagement with your customer. And of course, that story has to start changing now. Start sharing some triumph stories in testimonials and that sort of thing. Solution aware, then it's expanded even more because now they're really into almost brand adoption at this point. They might be testing something about your solution or taking advantage of some of the added value information that you are providing them. All you're trying to do is literally get your story hooks into them. And again, do this only if you can actually help them when it's all said and done. But then that next fourth revolution, it's product aware. I'm like, wow, this stuff really works. Where do we get going? How do we make this thing happen? Boom. Then your job, of course, is to deliver on all of those promises that you have made, both in the telling of your story, inviting them into your story, and then delivering, be it the product or service, initiative, vision, mission, whatever it is you are getting them to buy into. So you have leveled them up into this most aware or super fan boy or girl. And it is just the natural expansion.
Back in the old days, this was me with Star Wars novels. I mean, and for people who are uninitiated, in between when the original trilogy concluded in 1983 and when the prequels started in 1999, there were a whole bunch of novels that were published. And now after Disney bought Star Wars, they decided all of those were non-canon and they call it expanded universe, which I think is nonsense. But anyway, I used to read those voraciously. Timothy Zahn is still one of my favorite sci-fi. Well, actually, no, not still. He is my favorite sci-fi author, bar none. I've never seen anybody better than him, or never read anybody better than him. But it's like, back then, right? All I needed to know was that there was another series coming out, and I was going out and finding it.
Yeah, you were a super fan. You were completely bought in.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I was a super fan. I was a total super fan. I used to go on discussion boards and debate with Trekkies about why Star Wars was better than Star Trek. I was that guy. Once I was employed and had a family, that all changed. But
yeah. One of the uses that I've seen really growing in the work that I'm doing with learning and development and sales and marketing is this concept around agile communications, which really comes out of the early 2000s agile software development, replacing the waterfall development thing. People believe they could get to the market faster and so forth. And then organizations started adopting this agile organization, playing off of that. And one thing that seems to really be missing out there is this idea of, well, that's all well and good, but if you can't communicate your big ideas in this new flattened structure of the agile organization, then you're not going to be agile. You are going to be slowed down. And this whole thought of agility being around speed is kind of a misnomer. It's really more about a mindset. So I've been doing so much work with a lot of brands on their agile communications, building that storytelling language internally, starting with the and, but, therefore, going to the 5 primal elements of a short story, and then ultimately teaching them my 10-step story cycle system for long-form communications and presentation. Are you doing a lot of work in Agile?
Yeah, a metaphor for Agile that I think is really important for people to wrap their heads around is because in a lot of management circles, especially unfortunately people who have not worked in Agile environments themselves, they think Agile equals faster, and it doesn't. Agile equals more flexible. So if you think about, say, like a normal waterfall business as a bicycle, Agile is, what a lot of people think of is, okay, Agile is like a motorcycle. It goes faster. No, Agile is a mountain bike. It can go over more varied terrain, but if you're on a paved road, it's actually slower than a regular bicycle. Agile processes involve increased overhead, because the idea is to be able to change course quickly. If you know exactly what you're doing, you will get there faster with traditional processes. The reason why Agile has become so popular is because of the exponentially increasing amount of uncertainty. But the only way that Agile becomes faster over the long run is if you are using the processes to be able to pivot and change direction. If you just layer Agile processes on top of traditional processes, you'll still be just as slow as inflexible as before, it'll be with the addition of more overhead. It will be the trifecta of dysfunction.
Trifecta of dysfunction. But my question is how many organizations really know where they're going and how they're going to get there as efficiently as possible? Aren't they mostly making it up as they go?
If if you have a manufacturing company like right now, because at the time of this recording, there are still supply chain shortages all over the place. So basically, if you have a manufacturing company and you're manufacturing to demand and you have a backlog, basically it's okay, turn the crank as quickly as you can. But even with that, people are going to be saying, okay, well, we need to figure out how we can expand capacity in order to capture the revenue opportunity. Well, now that injects uncertainty because you have to figure out, okay, are you going to build it? Are you going to buy it? How are you going to have logistics and distribution? There's all these, and then what's? And I think that's the type of situation where agile processes can really, can really make a difference, because I think the traditional difference between, say, like a waterfall process and as an agile process is that in waterfall, what you'll do is you'll lay out the sequential steps and dependencies that need to happen for a future outcome. Whereas in agile, what you'll do is you'll say, okay, within a certain time box, let's say 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever that time box is, within a short time box, what finished output can we create in that time box? And then what you do is you plan for your next time box and say, what either iterated or new finished output can we create in that time box? The idea being that at the end of every agile sprint, you have a product. It may be imperfect. It may have bugs, but you have something that is usable. Whereas with a traditional waterfall type of situation, you don't have usable product until the very end. Well, by the time you get to the end of that process, your product may be obsolete.
When I'm looking at this, and I started doing a lot more studying around agile and this idea of what you said of finding that whole idea of things are changing so quickly. We don't know where it's going, but we have to keep moving forward and hopefully take the right steps in the right direction. There was a report that came out earlier this year from the Harris Poll and Grammarly, and they interviewed a ton of North American companies and found, after doing their math on this around miscommunication, that miscommunication is costing North American businesses $1.2 trillion in losses annually, and they were able to even boil it down to it equates to 1 day of productivity lost every single week per employee, whether you are in the agile world or the non-agile world. And what has thrown the biggest curveball into business is the pandemic and now this new hybrid work environment, which also adds to complexity, to wondering where in the hell we're going with all this, and miscommunication across the board. And that's where I feel agile communications, or this concept, at least the way I'm framing it, using story, building a common storytelling culture that will work in these flattened out hierarchical systems and do a better job of communicating with people virtually when you're not sitting in the room and you can't take the tells from their body language and so forth.
Precisely. I mean, and, I think we were talking about this in the pre-show, but I think the second half to what you're talking about with the flattened organizational hierarchy, which, by the way, a flat organization, that's the way of the future. These rigid hierarchies, I call this the General Electric religion. So from the, kind of starting in the 1990s with the Jack Welch GE, there was this process, there was this really heavy process that GE implemented, and GE told itself that this was how it created leaders. So basically what GE would do is you'd have people who were managers. Those managers would have peer reviews. They'd have reviews of their superiors, and this would be repeated in each additional step of the hierarchy. And, there were some people who came out of GE that did pretty well. But there's a tick to that, though, which is that the people who came out of GE and went to other companies repeated that GE system in those other companies. And the one big problem with the GE system is that after once you get into that management hierarchy, your job the way that you advance is not by being amazing at what you do. It's by being the best connected within the political hierarchy. So basically what it does is it creates that career path that shifts when all of a sudden you stop becoming a technician or leader of whatever you were doing and you start becoming a company politician. And I think one of the things that we're seeing right now is a lot of the extended fallout of that. And I think what the flatter hierarchy does is the flatter hierarchy, if you do it right, will suppress that momentum, because in that GE type of structure, the way that people create a sense of their importance is by what they call empire building, or basically creating a whole bunch of people who report to them. Well, that creates an incentive to add people when they're not needed to increase the perceived importance of whoever's in charge. This happens in corporate structures, happens in government structures, happens in media structures. And I think that right there is one of the prime structural inefficiencies of, of contemporary business that a construct like Agile really helps to start to ferret out. Because I think in order to remain globally competitive, whether it's American businesses, UK, European, whatever, we can't just take the structures that we had from 30 years ago and extend them forward. You have to figure out how do you structurally change so that you are creating more value without adding more overhead.
Well, in that hierarchical structure has its own form of storytelling too, and in a lot of cases, it's keeping stories out or removing stories from the structure because those in charge want you to be living by their narrative and only their narrative. Once you start flattening it out and democratizing leadership, it's been shown that you get way more productivity, you have happier people. It may add more overhead, like you're saying with the Agile setup, but it may also pay off for itself in the long run through employee retention, through innovation. And that all really begins with building a common storytelling language that everybody from the leadership on high to that flattened organization can buy into and use to build that camaraderie within a group.
Agile, again, if you follow it as it's designed, is almost always superior because what you can do is you can react to market changes more quickly. Whereas, in a waterfall type of environment, typically you tend to be kind of pot committed toward a certain direction because since you won't be able to realize value until you're done, even if you start figuring out that half of the assumptions you're making were wrong, you can't create value from whatever you're producing until it's finished. And so you end up having kind of a death march to the end because you have to get there. Otherwise, you have to throw everything away. And so what Agile ultimately does is it reduces the amount of work that you throw away while you're iterating. Because, a lot of us think about, think about how many hours you put in. Oh, I work so hard. But if you really want to be honest, you have to think, okay, how many of those hours are like really, really, truly, genuinely valuable for a tangible output. And in a lot of cases, that's a very small amount. And that isn't necessarily to try to make people feel bad about themselves. Just understand that there is a lot of discovery waste that's inherent in traditional processes. I think it just kind of gets hidden in a lot of the managerial posturing.
We'll be right back with Doug Utberg. But first, have you ever considered the power of the word because to make your copy connect with the pattern-seeking, cause and effect limbic buying brain? Technically, the word because is a conjunction used to introduce a word or phrase that stands for a clause expressing an explanation or reason. An explanation or reason for why something has or could happen. Because, we've learned, is one of the most powerful words you can use when crafting ABTs. For instance, President John F. Kennedy used storytelling and the nesting of ABTs in his speeches to sell America on what would become the $24 billion Apollo mission. Listen for the ABT and the use of because in a portion of his famous speech at Rice University in Houston, Texas.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
Now you can learn how and where to use the compelling conjunction of because in the ABT Agile Narrative Framework that works precisely because it's built upon the three forces of story: agreement, contradiction, and consequence. Our primal pattern-seeking, cause and effect, decision-making, limbic buying brain loves this framework. Agreement, contradiction, and consequence, and the word because just adds to its power. You want to know how? Just visit businessthestory.com/ABT to access the ABTs of Agile Communications quick online course. In 3 20-minute modules, you will put this messaging marvel to work for you, well, pretty much immediately. The ABT is short and sweet, but tricky because it simply takes practice to perfect. Therefore, start your ABT training today at businessthestory.com/ABT because we've learned that building your narrative intuition with the ABT is where all-powerful, persuasive, and influential business, sales, and marketing storytelling begins. That's the businessthestory.com/ABT. Now let's get back to our conversation with Doug. So that's my transition into your work in affiliate marketing, because isn't affiliate marketing, even in of itself, kind of an agile concept? It means you're not having to show up to the job every single day and report to someone else. Mm-hmm. Isn't it kind of a democratizing of business building if you go through this affiliate program?
Well, precisely. And so because the idea behind affiliate marketing is that, okay, so, if I go and I say, create a product or a service or whatever. And so, if I am the only one that's going to sell it or promote it, that will reduce the amount of reach that I have. And, or if I want to go broad with promoting it, I have to do a very large capital outlay up front without knowing how much of a return I'm going to get. Whereas when you go, if you do an affiliate type of program, which is where you are promoting somebody else's product, then what then in that case, what you're doing is you're still providing an extremely valuable service because generally speaking, right, especially if you're talking services, but even for products, the getting someone in the door who is interested in the product and or maybe willing to buy is roughly half of the overall value equation. And so there are a tremendous amount of people who have done exceptionally well without ever creating a single product just because they develop a community that has a high level of affinity based on the stories that they're telling. And then essentially what they will do is they will personally screen and vet the products and offers that they promote, and the people who feel an affinity with them, will be drawn toward those, because they're basically able to borrow the credibility of the affiliate. And so, I think that affiliate marketing is, I would say it's almost that purist storytelling type of selling. And because generally speaking, the people who will be the most successful affiliates are the ones who have accumulated an audience that identify with their story.
So do you have to be a major influencer out there to be successful at affiliate marketing?
Absolutely not. And in fact, in a lot of cases, some of the most successful affiliates are people who have surprisingly small audiences. But if you're going to have a small audience, they need to be super fans. You can be successful if you have a giant audience of semi-fans. But if you have a super fan audience, then you actually don't need as many people as you might think to be very successful. But that all comes down to the quality of stories that you're telling and how tight of a bond you form with your audience.
And what is your program about? Can you tell us, who do you attract into it and what do you teach?
Our program is basically about how to promote any kind of product or service that they want to. We have a sales funnel that's included with the program so that you can begin promoting immediately. But then there's also walking through, okay, how does organic social selling work? And because the way that organic social marketing works is what you do is you connect with people and then you start moving them up that awareness curve. You'll connect with somebody who might be unaware or problem aware or solution aware. You start warming them up. You're working them up that awareness curve before you drop a link on them. Because, the way that a lot of people used to do affiliate marketing would be, okay, they'd get a social profile. They just start spamming links onto their Facebook wall. And they'd say, well, why isn't anybody clicking? Well, it's because you're pushing an offer on people who may not even be problem aware. But then if we expand it some more, we'd start saying, okay, what are the mechanics of how a sales funnel works? Because like, for example, if you're putting a sales funnel together, in a lot of cases, you'll start with an opt-in. The opt-in will then trigger a follow-up email series. And then in some of the most effective sales funnels, what will happen is you'll want to eventually get somebody to talk on the phone with a person, because close rates on on like say a sales letter will be like about 1%, maybe 3% if the copywriter is exceptionally good. Whereas if you have somebody who's talking with a person and they're actually qualified, your close rates will be like say 15% if somebody is a complete novice, and they can go up to 25 to 30% if they're even halfway decent. And so, but what it is, it's about stringing those different elements together so that now instead of just promoting one offer and saying, okay, I have one trick in the stable that I can use to try to create an income. Now you will know the fundamentals so that you can, so that you can either create new offers or create hybrid offers. Because one of the ways that a lot of people successfully promote affiliate offers is by providing bonuses. So, for example, I might be promoting, this offer that I'm currently doing. Well, then one of the things I might add on there is to say, okay, well, I'm also going to be putting a Facebook group where I do weekly live streams. I also have a set of video trainings. I also have a set of worksheets, et cetera, and so now when you stack that value on top of what you're offering, this provides a reason for somebody to buy from me as opposed to somebody else who's selling exactly the same thing. This is where the real point of differentiation comes in affiliate marketing, is because a lot of people are promoting the exact same core offers. You need to have some point of differentiation. The most important point of differentiation is if people feel affinity with you, the person who's promoting, but you can also augment that with either again, frequently digital products, right? Video trainings, worksheets. It can be physical products. You can have things like books, hard copy worksheets. There's a lot of different ways you can do this, but I think it all revolves around supporting that core story, which is how people build affinity with you, the person who is promoting the offers.
And to be clear, when you're saying about you, the person promoting the offer, you essentially are the middleman. You are the one. You haven't created the class. You haven't written the book. You haven't produced the videos, but you are representing that producer, that creator, and you're selling it through your network of hopefully super fan boys and girls, and you are making a percentage. What, on average, is the percentage people make as affiliates?
That is a really loaded question. If you're talking high ticket, it tends to be a little lower. It's say like around 20 to 30%. But on the other hand, if you make 30% of a $6,000 sale, you're probably not too upset. Whereas if you're talking lower ticket digital products, you can be in the 40 to 50% range. Sometimes the commission rates get pretty high, but a lot of it. I think the most important thing is to make sure that you genuinely believe in what you're promoting so that you're not abusing your community.
And there are so many products out there that you could be representing.
Yeah.
How do you go about it as an affiliate of creating a stable of products that, complement each other, you do believe in, versus just being the target of affiliate marketing and you are sending it out, you're representing everybody.
That's actually, I think, where a big part of kind of what the community building is about. As the person who's kind of the community leader, you have to really be thinking, okay, what are the kind of services, options, offers, whatever that are that are supporting that are supporting and reinforcing the community.
So it's really about you and your community, and to make sure that you have matching offers for what people care about. Otherwise, I imagine they could look at you as just kind of a shill, just representing and going and trying to grab as much money as you can from as many different products and services as you possibly can.
There are certainly plenty of those out there. And there was an anecdote that I wanted to share when you were talking about the middleman. And I did want to say this, a lot of times, the middleman gets a tough rap. I forget who I heard it say, but they said that if you build a better mousetrap, the world will walk right past your door unless you sell it. Which is because the best products in the world still need to be promoted. Even if it's something that's being given away for free. I have had the experience of creating a sales funnel where I was giving away an opt-in product for free, and I couldn't even get people to convert on that. even the best thing in the world still has to be sold. You can have the absolute highest value proposition in the history of the human race, and it still has to be sold and still has to be promoted.
Bob Hoffman, the ad contrarian out of San Francisco, which, by the way, writes one of the absolute best newsletters on advertising there is, called The Ad Contrarian, summed it up so beautifully a couple months ago in one of his letters. And he says, forget all the BS about branding and all of this other stuff. What it ultimately comes down to is fame. You want to be the most famous offering in your market as best you can. And I thought, boy, that's a really nice way of saying exactly what you said right there is It doesn't matter how good your offering is if people don't know about it. So my final question with your affiliates in teaching them. So you were saying you can do this full time, make a ton of money, and you are out there pushing this. How many hours does a person have to invest daily to become a very successful affiliate?
You probably want to plan on a good 2 to 3 hours, more or less indefinitely. Generally speaking, when you're starting, you'll want to front load your time investment because if you're doing a done for you system, you probably don't need to have as much time investment because you don't necessarily need to build your sales funnel, which is, even with the tools that are available now, it's 1,000 times easier than it used to be, but it's still a lot more work than most people tend to think it is. But one of the things that you just always want to be doing is you want to be interacting with your audience. You want to be building your audience. You want to be generating new pieces of content. Because of course the fundamental part of being a successful affiliate is establishing that thought leadership. If you let that thought leadership atrophy, then there's not a reason for anybody to buy through you versus somebody else.
Yeah, you got to keep showing up.
Exactly.
Well, this has been really fascinating, Doug. Where can people go to learn more about you and your affiliate marketing program?
Sure. The best place there is just go to dougbusiness.com. That's DOUGBUSINESS.com. You might want to put a www in front of there. I don't remember exactly how I have the DNS set up, but yeah, just go www.dougbusiness.com. And I actually have my own podcast too. It's called Terminal Value. Just go into Apple or Spotify or whatever and just type in Terminal Value and it'll show right up.
And what's Terminal Value about?
So terminal value is the idea is asking the question, how do growth-oriented people transform their business and life to world-class? And, one of the ways that you do that is basically through generating a side hustle that will let you detach from the traditional method of having to trade your hours for dollars. Now, if you were in a career that you absolutely love, you may want to keep going with that. But it's really about being able to generate that financial. I hate the phrase financial freedom because it's so overused, but I would say that financial wiggle room so that you are able to spend your time engaged with things that you really believe in.
Well, in our now ever expanding agile marketplace, this wasn't really available to people a few years ago. It is new. You don't have to show up and spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week sitting at a desk. There are so many different side hustles going on. And even side hustle, I think, gets sort of a bad connotation to it. But it's really like just working smarter. What is it that you really love to do? If you built this community out there, how can you impart greater value on them through the products that you are affiliated with and you promote, providing, that you believe in them and that they are really going to be of service to your market? Learn the stories you need to tell as you work through that hierarchy from most aware to product aware to solution aware to problem aware to unaware. Actually, I had that exactly backwards, didn't I?
So you were going down the hierarchy as opposed to up.
I was going down.
I was going to say it's just sort ascending versus sort descending.
Yeah, same thing. Well, really, really fascinating. I'm so happy that Kevin got us connected today, Doug, and thanks so much for taking the time to be here. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was a lot of fun.
Hey, and thank you all for listening to this edition. If you liked what you heard, man, please feel free to share it with your world out there. And don't be shy. Go on iTunes and give us a 5-star rating for this episode, if you would, because it'll help us get found in the lousy, crazy, noisy world out there. If I can be a service to you, come on over to the Business of Story. And if you have not yet taken your ABT course, then visit businessofstory.com/ABT. In this quick online course, you are going to learn this messaging marvel that I wished I had learned in the third grade. It is literally that powerful. And if you find yourself in an agile situation and you're trying to figure out how best to articulate your ideas so that they land right the first time, every time, then check out the ABTs of Agile Communications, businessofstory.com/ABT. And until next week, when we will have another amazing story artist right here for you like Doug, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make sure it's a great one. Thanks so much for listening.